Hello, everybody. My name is Damian Crawford, and this is the sixth of a series of interviews for a game bundle going on from December 20th to January 3rd. This is for the shorter games with worse graphics bundle, and this is episode 6 of Indie2Indie, and today I am joined by...
TangledVirus.
Right. So exactly how long have you been making games? Because I've seen a bunch of different games on your itch.io page.
Since 2019.
So just, well,
About a
2
year.
years.
Yeah.
Okay, wow. How did you get into making games?
So I used to, I still play a lot of games on Nicho,
Mm-hmm.
and and then I started seeing that a lot of the games that I played used things like Game Maker or RPG Maker or RenPy and even Twine, and I was like, a lot of these things are for free. I could do a game as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I first tried Swine, and that's how I made my first game, which is Burial Buddha. And I liked it. It was really fun. So I decided to make a visual novel because 2 weeks after making the my first game, I heard there was a thing called NaNoRenO, which is
Mm-hmm.
a gem for making a visual novel in 1 month. So I decided nothing better than to learn a new thing than 1 month. So that's how I made my first visual novel, and that's that.
Great. Yeah, I mean, it's a great way to get into it is, you know, jams are especially great for getting into games simply because I at least know when I was starting to get into making games, I wanted to do all these different things, and so the project would be entirely overblown, and I would eventually finish it, but, after years. Um, Whereas jams really force you to have those constraints and at least get something out quickly. So very quickly you can say, oh, I at least made a game, and then you can really feel like, okay, you know what, I can keep doing this. Um, so that's a great way to get into it. Why do you make games?
Well, they are fun to make, and despite the difficulties with making a game and having to deal with bugs and stuff like that, in the end, I'm like, this was fun. I should do it again.
Hmm.
But also, I want more games about trans people made by trans people,
Hmm.
because I usually feel like that that's not an offense to cis people, but on my experiences, like when a cis person does a game about trans people or with trans characters, it's always a version of a trans person that is like enjoyable only to a cis audience. And I
Hmm.
want something that trans people can play and be like, yeah, that reminds me of myself or someone that I know.
Hmm.
Someone very weird, but someone that I know.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm trying to think of the right way to phrase this. Trans representation in video games, predominantly AAA video games,
Mhm.
um, because on itch.io the scene is a bit better in that regard. But
Yes.
um, in AAA games, transness is always, brought up as, oh, this is why the character is in, without any amount of depth or, you know, they don't feel
It's
like a real person, they feel like a caricature.
yeah, and it's always they are always sad or in big trouble because they are trans. They are not a person that has problems that happens to be trans. No, the fact that they are trans is the fact that they are in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And I played The Last of Us 2, and they have a trans character there. I forgot his name,
Mm-hmm.
but I finished the game and I actually like him. I think he, in the end, is a person that is in the post-apocalyptic world.
Mm-hmm.
He never saw how normal life was, but he still is always walking towards what he thinks is going to be a happy life. And he even make, I think her name is Abby,
Mm-hmm.
into a better person. He being there for her makes her a more moral person.
Mm-hmm.
And like that's a great character. I fucking love him. But of all the all the options that you had to make drama related to this character, what would be his character arc? No, it's because he's trans. He's unhappy because he's trans. It's not like he's in a cult that kills people. Couldn't he be like, I don't know, unhappy with the direction that the cult is going towards? Couldn't he be questioning, is this what I want in my life? But no, it's because he's trans. It's AAA games and general big media, like big movies and TV shows. When a person is trans, all of their problems is because they are trans, that's and of course, in real life, being trans brings you problems.
Mm-hmm.
Like I live in Brazil, and because I'm a trans person, my life expectancy is 35 years old because violence is extreme here.
Mm-hmm.
And I face transphobia all the time. But that's not the only origin of my problems as a person. There are other things, and that's valid for everyone that is trans. But also, being trans makes me happier because, whoa, I'm finally comfortable in my body. I'm in a community that I find people that I like and stuff. Games and big media never talk about the good parts of being trans.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Yeah, it really is something that they seem to shy away from. It's almost like they're sort of they're acting like, oh, you can actually be comfortable with the person that you are, like even with all of this. It's like, no, because of this. But
Yeah.
yeah. Um, so going away from that a bit, do you consider this a job or more of a hobby?
I want it to be a job. I
Mm-hmm.
would like it to become a job, but so far it's just a hobby.
Mm-hmm. So let's actually talk about Camelot the Demon Hunter a bit.
Okay.
Um, how many people were on the team for that? Was it just you? Did you have somebody that helped write it or do the art or any testers?
It was just me, and I have a friend called James
Mm-hmm.
who offered themselves to edit the game because English is not my first language,
Mm-hmm.
and English is their first language, so they are helping me edit the game,
Mm-hmm.
and that's it. But it was mostly me.
That's, yeah, cool. Um, so what engine was this game made in?
Rampy.
Mm-hmm.
It's a free visual novel engine that uses Python.
Mm-hmm. I know somebody who's used RenPy on a lot of stuff, and it's surprisingly versatile, even though a lot of people only know the surface level stuff, but it's still able to do quite a lot.
Like, if I only know the surface level things,
Mm-hmm.
but even with just surface level stuff, you can do a lot of it. The documentation for it is a bit old,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a huge enough community that if you look around in Google, you're going to find what you want. If you go to YouTube, you're going to find tutorials.
Mm-hmm.
So I have no coding experience and I'm being able to learn it pretty easily. And it all thanks to the fact that it has a huge community behind it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's free.
Right. Yeah. That also helps out a lot too. Especially at our scale where you don't necessarily have the money to be sinking into a lot of development costs that a lot of people would just consider to be necessary anyway. It's no, we need to cut corners as much as we can financially. Um, so why did you make this game?
So, like, I had the idea for it since last year because last year I made a game called Friend and the Demon Hunter.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, I want to tell more stories in this setting. So right there, I had an idea about a demon hunter called Kamelot, and throughout the year, I developed who the characters would be, who Camelot is as a person, what the overall plot would be.
Mm-hmm.
And once Yuri Jam 2020 started, I started to write in it.
Cool. Um, so why did you go for the particular aesthetic of that game? Why that sort of art style and that sort of feel?
Well, the art style is because it's how I draw. I like anime, and I like one of the ideas that I had with Camelot was to just take pictures of places here in my city to just use as backgrounds, but it didn't felt it didn't felt that would go well with the character, so I just decided to draw everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not a very good artist, but I always try my best to make sure that okay, this place here is a place.
Mm-hmm.
It's slightly weird. There's a big dead demon there, but that's normal. And the characters, I just want people look at them and say, yeah, this person is that's not a normal person.
Mm-hmm.
That's a weirdo. And that's the aesthetic. And also, I like to draw trans women in all shapes and sizes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that trans people have to respond to a cis way of looking.
Mm-hmm.
If you want, you should, but only if you want.
Mm-hmm.
And even in a safe, unsafe place like Brazil, I think that you as a person and what you feel like, how you want to look, and how you want to transition is the most important part.
Mm-hmm.
So I just drew a bunch of butches that just happen to be trans.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the aesthetic.
Yeah, that's something that, as a non-binary person, I'm very used to seeing how conventionally attractive representations where, you know, that everybody seems to have, well, not everybody, but a lot of people, you know, seem to have this sort of ideal of what a non-binary person should look like.
And it's always white.
Yes,
Like,
that's very true.
like a thing that happens a lot here in Brazil is that if you look at statistics, is that the majority of trans people in the country are people of color.
Mm-hmm.
But every time you go watch a show here and there is a trans person or just a queer person in general is white.
Mm-hmm.
white and blonde. And not against it.
Mm-hmm.
I am white. Not blonde, but white. But it's weird that in every show here, every movie, every time there's a queer person, they are white. And one of the reasons that the majority of the characters that I have as protagonists being people of color is that
Mm-hmm.
the majority of people in Brazil are people of color, but you only see white people in television or in
Yeah.
movies, and it's weird.
Mm-hmm.
Like beauty patterns that are inherently racist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of, I don't think Western idealization's quite the phrase I'm looking for, but it's something close to that, where it's Western media has such a control over media that
Yes.
that it's not just a grasp, it's a stranglehold that it has, and is something that it's important for everybody to be aware of.
Yeah.
Especially, you know, if we are making media, it's especially important to do that sort of thing. Um,
Yeah, I received once a message from someone that played one of my games,
mhm,
and it was a game that I made with the last year samurai for non-binary jam
mhm,
called My Home Is You. And what they said it was I never seen a game where a non-binary person is black.
mhm,
And that was just weird to me. But then I realized that when you see non-binary people in media, they are always white.
mhm.
And I think that's a very Eurocentric thing.
Yeah.
We have like we live in the American continent, but we are still responding to Eurocentric ways of looking at beauty and the body and stuff like this.
Mhm.
But Western media has such a grasp on media that this Eurocentric sort of thing becomes the standard over here.
Mhm.
That's my thoughts on it, at least.
Yeah. Um, yeah, because I've also there was a podcast I was on some time ago, and this was when I was releasing like my 99 character game. And so it has like a wide amount of diversity in it because there's absolutely no excuse to not have that. But they asked me a question that threw me off. They asked about like why do some of these characters have such long names? I'm like, oh, you're talking about like Oluwayemisi because I went for some characters to have traditional African names because they're African.
Yeah.
Um, but to them, it was just, they took it like, oh, such a weird thing to have in this gimmicky game. And it's like, no, it's just like base level representation. Like,
Yeah.
I, and I went on for it for a little bit and they cut that out of the podcast. And I'm like, yeah, I can see why you did that. Um, but yeah, it was just, it's something that people are, I think, better at least at our scale, because so many indie creators are marginalized in at least some way. If not, even if they're, cis white male, they still, if you're an indie creator and you're that, you're still probably like in financial problems or something because this stuff
Yeah,
just
like
doesn't make money. And so you're at least like a little more aware of what other situations are. Um, but so many people aren't. And so, I'm very glad to have had this game and, you know, all the other games that are in the bundle where we really get that sense of diversity. It's even among the developers, you know, you're in Brazil, we have somebody in Germany, somebody in Russia, somebody in Canada, I think we have somebody in Mexico. Um, you know, we have more than just US, which seems to be like such a focal point for people that make games. So it's nice to have at least that diversity. It skews a bit more, you know, white male than I would like, but um, you know, we at least also have like diversity in the amount of games that are participating too, and
Yes.
variety. So I'm glad for
And
that.
in this of representation,
Hmm.
one thing that kind of just occurred naturally is that I set most of my games in Rio de Janeiro
Hmm.
because it's where I live.
Right.
But after I started doing that, I just noticed how many games are set in the US, or even if it's a fantasy world, it's some sort of European fantasy worlds.
Hmm.
Nothing against it, and sometimes a person lives in the US and wants to make a game set in their city,
Hmm.
and that's more than valid. But like, it's rare to see a game set in Brazil, and when it's set in Brazil, it's usually here in Rio de Janeiro.
Hmm.
Despite Brazil being one of the biggest countries in the world in terms of size,
Hmm.
like the only game that I can really think of that is set in Brazil but not in Rio is Max Payne 3, and that game has a lot of issues.
Yes.
It's it has a lot of issues, and the first time I started noticing that how games media see Brazil was I was playing Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2,
Hmm.
which has two levels set in Rio de Janeiro, and they are set in a favela, which is a type of slum here. At the time, I was around 14 years old, and I was just amazed that there was a Brazilian level in this big game.
Hmm.
But years later, now seeing this, it's a bunch of American military people invading a favela and shooting at drug dealers here. And drug dealers in Brazil are usually young men that didn't have access to good schools, that are just trying to make a living, an unfortunate way of making a living, but a way of living.
Hmm.
And that just and Max Payne has the same problem. Is Max Payne shooting a bunch of young black men from a poor part of one of the biggest cities in the country? And I just don't like that.
Hmm.
Like, Brazil is more than just poverty. Brazil has a lot of things, and even me as a person, I can't show all of these things. And I think we should have more game developers here making games here in Brazil, even if they are weird, fantastical games. But
Hmm.
like, one day I want to see a Persona-like game that is set in, I don't know, Salvador, Bahia.
Hmm.
It's just set in some big city in Brazil that is not Rio de Janeiro.
Hmm.
But that's it. I
Yeah.
think this sort of representation is important.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, yeah, because, you know, we have high fantasy games that really took a page out of like Lord of the Rings and Dungeons and Dragons, where now it's so much fantasy is centered in Europe or, you know, a lot of first person shooters and whatnot. They are, you know, you're playing as a US soldier and you are going around, killing people who are not white.
Yeah.
And that's just seen as, okay, yeah, this is fine, this is normal, this is okay. It's like, that's fucked. Like, it's not good. Um, and I'm hopeful that things move past this, but it's difficult at the AAA scale. And but at least we are seeing there have been some games that have drawn upon African mythology, that have drawn
Yes.
upon Indian mythology, that have, drawn upon Native American mythology at times, which that's hard to find here. But there are becoming more movements, and I'm glad for that, and it's important for the industry as a whole, and I would say for everybody as a whole, simply because this is such a mass media, and speaking for the US, our education system about other places is not that great. Um, so it's important for people to get information where they can. And I'm hopeful that, people will continue to make games and then start actually like branching out with their worldview and, adding more settings and whatnot. Or at least adding more cultures. Like, one of my personal issues with fantasy, because I do like fantasy, but you have orcs and elves and dwarves and all these other different, they should be different culturally, but the differences are just so slight. Like, oh, elves live in trees, and it's like, okay, well, why don't they? Like, none of them have a different accent from each other, even though they're all trying to speak a common language. Um, or you don't see like an elf trying to speak Dwarven and having like a severe accent and having them like look over like, okay, you're trying to say this, but what you mean to say is this, or whatever. Um, because I would like to see at least just if games are going to try to claim to be diverse in that way, like, oh, well, we've got like all these cool things, it's like, okay, well, we have real world representations of cultural differences. Please use them and add in like, oh, this is where we got this from, you know. Um, so that's some personal gripe I would like to see. Um, I've gotten entirely off track here. um,
Yeah.
so getting back to Kamelot the Demon Hunter, how long did it take to make the game?
2 months. And the game is not technically ready yet.
Hmm.
What I release is what I've been calling the base game,
Right.
which is just 2 routes.
Hmm.
And I've been working on adding another 3 routes to the game. So I'm going to be adding them one by one.
Hmm.
Right now, I'm working on Fleur's routes, which is another character in the game, and you can go on a date with her, and will get a bit weird.
Hmm.
And the idea is finish that route, go add the other one, and then add the last one, which is going to be big.
Hmm.
And once that is done, the game will be done.
Hmm. Um, a quick question about that, since we're just on this topic about the different routes. Because I noticed that you have a few, name the Demon Hunter games on your page. Are they connected at all, or is this a standalone thing?
So they are all in the same setting.
Mm-hmm.
And the first one was Friend and the Demon Hunter, which was supposed to be a single game.
Mm-hmm.
But the second half of it, I wasn't really satisfied with it. So I decided to cut that part out and making it into its own game so I could work on that part.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad that the parts that I had to cut it wasn't a good part to say to be continued.
Mm-hmm.
So I finished what would be Friend and the Demon Hunter, was satisfied with that, and then I took a little break from stuff because I was tired,
Mm-hmm.
and then I went to work on that. I I pretty sure that I had to rewrite most of that of what would be Nomad the Demon Hunter
Mm-hmm.
just so I could be satisfied with it. And then I made the game.
Mm-hmm.
So Friend of the Demon Hunter is the first one. Is about a girl named Fran. She has her best friend who's called Nomad. And one day she discovers two things. One, Nomad is a demon hunter. And second, Nomad has a crush on her. The second game is Nomad the Demon Hunter, and it's just the conclusion of the story.
Mm-hmm.
But Camelot, its own game, its own story with its own characters. Nomad is there, and the events of the other two games did happen,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't need to play it to understand.
Okay, great. Um, so have you learned anything from making this? Whether it's, game development related, like, oh, I know how to use RenPy better, or, something about yourself, like, oh, I understand this a bit better now that I've written it.
So about game development, if you compare Camelot to Fran, you're going to see that I learn a lot more about RenPy.
Mm-hmm.
I think Camelot in general is a better game in the terms of how it looks and how it behaves and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. And I'm still applying stuff to Camelot because I'm still learning.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I learned a lot about managing my own time because with Fran, I had 2 months. Same with Camelot, and
Mm-hmm.
the development of Camelot was a lot smoother because I knew how to I know better what it takes to make a visual novel. I know, and now I know better how to schedule the things,
Mm-hmm.
like how much time I have to write, how much time I have to make the art, how much time I have to make UI, and how to separate things into smaller tasks. Because okay, art, a visual novel has a lot of art, so let's separate into characters, main characters, secondary characters, backgrounds, stuff like this. And this is a thing that I can use on everything on my life because scheduling and knowing how to manage your time is important as a
Mm-hmm.
skill for anything really. And as a person, I it was already with friend that I realized what I like to write
Mm-hmm.
and and what I have fun writing, which is I really like urban fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that's one of the reasons that I like anime so much because it's usually a normal looking town in Japan. Oh yeah, monsters exist.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, this boy that is going to school, he has to fight the monsters now. You can do it, boy. Um, and I never realized that about myself.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was 15, 16, I was really into Bleach. And if I was 15, 16 now, I could explain to you why I like Bleach. And it's this boy, he's going to school. Oh, he's a soul reaper now. He has a huge sword
Mm-hmm.
and he sucks at using it. And and it's also helped me because I can explain to people this stuff that I like. And that's one of the reasons I also like magical girl anime
Mm-hmm.
because urban fantasy. And with Camelot, I think I really made something that I can say that's the sort of stuff that I like and show it to people.
Cool. Yeah, as somebody else who I watched Bleach. I read all of Bleach,
Me
which,
too.
eh. Which, that's also the way I felt about Naruto as well. Because, yeah, I read all of Naruto. Um,
Same.
I mean, I'm surprised was as cool as he was, but besides that,
Should have finished the manga.
yeah, that should have been like the last moment, and that's it.
The end.
Although I will say, okay, so I guess spoilers for Naruto, everybody. Um, um, but it's not like end spoilers, but there's the fight where it's um, Killer Bee versus Sasuke, and it's Sasuke with his squad of his random people that he's recruited, and Killer Bee like hits him super hard to where he's supposed to die, but then Jugo's able to like split cells with him and keep him alive. I would have loved if that was just the end of Sasuke,
Yeah,
personally. Like,
same.
he was super cocky and he got destroyed for it. And that would have been a great message to send everybody. Um,
Don't be cocky,
yeah.
especially against Killer Bee.
Yeah, especially against a guy who's like proven himself to be weird, but highly capable and dangerous. And he's like, whatever, I've got this. And then just thwack. Um, I would have loved that. And like, even after, you know, infinite amounts of plot armor on their side, B is able to still like get out of there, and it's basically like, okay, well, this has been a weird day, but it doesn't really change things much for me, and then he just leaves. Like, it
Yeah.
was such a like to be at that scale of difference in power. I would have loved for that to just. I don't like Sasuke as a character. I just
Me neither.
early on I understood. It's good to have a rival character. Um, it was very much a because I was into like early Pokemon. It was very much like an Ash Ketchum Gary Oak situation where you've got this really cocky, arrogant, natural talent sort of person with this other guy who's trying to prove himself, do this for himself, and does a lot of hard work to get to the end point. Um, so yeah, I would have I understood early on, but eventually I was like, just get rid of him. Like
Same.
make him full villain and no redemption, or just get done. Like
Yes. I had the same opinion, but then Rock Lee appeared,
mm-hmm,
and I was like, Rock Lee should either be the protagonist
mm-hmm,
or a rival to Naruto, because both Naruto and Rock Lee are trying really hard to accomplish what they want.
mm-hmm,
And that's one of the things that this series is about. That hard work
mm-hmm,
is important. But Naruto has the nine tail fox demon inside him.
mm-hmm,
So he has a natural advantage. He has a lot more chakra than everybody else.
mm-hmm.
But Hockley, all he has is technique.
Yes.
All he has is hard training. So I think that if Hockley had become the rival to Naruto,
Mm-hmm,
a guy that is above his level, doesn't have the same advantages as him, and is just doing that and being able to do that through hard work,
mm-hmm,
would have been a great character. And going into rivals,
mm-hmm.
because it's normal to have rivals in shonen anime, because a rival is a really good thing to have, actually.
Oh yeah.
I think when you want to write a rival, you need, okay, who is the protagonist? Who would be the opposite of the protagonists?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a big fan of a manga called Hellsing,
Yes.
and the protagonist is a nine unkillable vampire called Alucard.
Mm-hmm.
So who would be his rival? oh, it's a priest.
Hmm. A priest
It's
with
just
regeneration.
a priest with
Yeah,
regeneration, but still just a priest.
right.
And oh, okay, it's just Alucard, but he loves God and
Hmm.
Jesus and has an orphanage.
Yeah.
And it's a great rivalry because oh, they respect each other and they are like each other. That's and in the end of Helsing, when Alucard defeats his rival,
Well,
the rival under
Helsing spoilers, everybody.
yes, this 10-year-old series where
Mhm.
Alucard was never defeated. Alucard wins, everybody.
Yeah.
And when he defeats his rival,
Hmm.
the rival was finally able to understand why Alucard is the way he is.
Hmm.
And you end up with that. You, as a reader, end up really enjoying their interactions because it's the same character. They are just in different sides and they still don't understand each other.
Hmm.
But once they do, there's no rivalry anymore. It's a friendship. They just
Hmm.
love trying to kill each other.
Right. Um,
And that's, I don't know. I just think when you have to write a rival, you need to think of who your main character is.
right. Yeah. To touch back on Helsing for a moment, because of how the final fight went down, um, Anderson was in a very tough spot. His arm was damaged beyond regeneration. And so he used the piece of the Lance of Longinus to, you know, become a
Become a
monster like
monster
on.
of gods.
Yes. Um, and so, and Alucard was just so. He was infuriated, but it was really frustration because he thought he had finally found, like, the human that could kill the monster. But
Yes.
then that human had to resort to monstrous ends. And even when um, Anderson figuratively and almost literally had him on the ropes, um, he was actually having a moment where he thought, okay, you know what? This is a fine ending. You know, I fought, I lost, but at least this is another person who tried their very best and was able to do it. Um, and then he hears Saras, and he snaps out of that and, has that sort of, like, I still have something to fight for moment, and takes down Anderson. Um, so it is a brutal fight. It is a lot of, death and destruction, but it is this very touching moment between two monsters who really just wanted to be two people. And it's very beautiful in that sort of way. Because as
It's my favorite moments in Helsing because
Mhm.
it's just the basically the two best characters in the series, and they are just having these amazing moments of frustration, as you said, and then just accepting that his life is coming to an end,
Mhm.
and when it ends, it ends in understanding.
Yes. And that is a great way to have that end. Um, because yeah, it really is about, you know, two people finally coming to that final understanding, and it is such a sad way for it to end. Um, which of course also makes the next scene hit that much harder, which
Yes,
I thought was very good. But
me too.
um, I, I do remember that I need to. This isn't supposed to be
Yeah,
me
we are
talking
talking
about.
about Naruto, Bleach, and Hellsing.
This has been good. We've covered diversity. We've covered anime and manga, so that's been really cool.
We covered the Hellsing.
Yeah. Everybody check out Helsing. Watch
It's really
Helsing.
good.
Also, first check out Helsing, and then check out Helsing Abridged. Because Helsing Abridged is funny, But
It's really good.
but the original Hellsing is so close to that. Like you'll really get an appreciation of like Jan Valentine, who in the original Hellsing, like you see how hard they had to like struggle to just push him a little more over the top for a bridge,
Yeah.
because he's not even that much. Like a literal line. Well, actually, no, I don't want to talk about that. I will keep going, and I don't want to spoil anything, but please watch Hellsing.
It's
Um,
amazing.
yeah, I don't want to spoil anything. I don't want to take anything away from people. If you haven't seen it, we've spoiled a bit for you, but please, like, it is great. Um, okay. Um, okay, so we last talked about how long. Oh no, we talked about did you learn anything from making Kamelot the Demon Hunter so many minutes ago. Um, okay, so back to this game. Are you happy with the game? I know that you're still making it, and you're still working on routes, but do you feel like this is worth what it has taken to make the game so far? And it's worth the time that and effort you're putting in to continue?
With the way that you can download the game right now,
Hmm.
I'm satisfied with it. I think that in these 2 months and then organizing how I'm going to update the game, I made the best decision with it. Because essentially the two routes that are in the game they aren't my favorites, but I love the characters in these routes. One is one of Camelot's girlfriends, which is Valkyria, and I just like Valkyria. I think she's dumb, but I love her.
Hmm.
And the other route is with Nomad, and I just like Nomad. I want more people to see her because she's cool. And as it is right now, I think the game, I'm satisfied with it. And I, I'm pretty sure that once I finish working on the game, it's going to be the game I'm most proud of.
Hmm. Great. Um, so let's actually talk a bit more about your games in general. Um, how would you describe the games you make? Is there a theme behind it, or is it really just what strikes you as interesting at the time?
It's a combination of the two. It's like with Camelot, as I was working on ideas with it, I just went, it's going to be about a polycube.
Hmm.
That I just had the idea and I went with it. And a lot of my games are like that. I just start working with whatever I'm feeling like with.
Hmm.
But a theme that I always want to put in my games is trans people and weird trans people.
Hmm.
Uh, that's essential. That's the thing that will unify all of my games is weird trans people.
All right. Um, do you have a favorite game that you've made?
It's Distortion Nation, with which I worked with other two people,
Hmm.
Charlie, who made the music, and Bayu Dev, who helped with editing the game and doing the UI and programming the game.
Hmm.
I'm always going to be very thankful for them to accept and to work with me because I admire them a lot.
Hmm.
And with the editing, they did a lot of effort to make sure that it still sounds like a game made by me, but with proper editing.
Hmm.
And and out of all of my games, is the one that is 100% how I want it to be.
Hmm. Right. Um, so let's say that you had an infinite amount of time, um, however many people that you wanted to work on something, however much money that you would need to make a game. What would you make?
First of all, I would make a game that is so gay that would rewrite reality. A crack would appear in the sky, and I don't know, a magical girl would appear and scoop the earth and say, "This shit's gonna be gay now.
Mm-hmm.
The skies are pink." I would also want to make a very gay first person shooter.
Okay.
I'm currently learning Godot to make a first-person shooter, and it's been difficult, but I can accomplish that. I also would like to make a survival horror game that is more focused on the investigative part of a survival horror game,
Mm-hmm.
because like Resident Evil, Silent Hill, Cold Fear, all of these games, there is always a big mystery of why is there monsters wanting to hurt me,
Mm-hmm.
and I would like to make a game that is more focused on the investigative part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And also just to make more visual novels. The bigger the better. The
Right.
gayer the better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something that I don't play a lot of horror games, but especially because a lot these days are more focused on, jump scares and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Whereas I prefer, like, if you're gonna really try and, do horror right, you have to be unsettling. Like, it's not about, just having that brief moment. It's about making a person, when they're playing, start to second guess everything that they're doing.
It's a
Um,
atmosphere of tension, of
yes.
anxiety, of fear. And I think that the original Silent Hill games are masterclasses on doing that, because it's not all the time there is a monster wanting to hurt you, but you are like, I don't like this city. I want to get out of here. This place gives me the creeps.
Mm-hmm.
The city and its atmosphere itself is the main source of tension.
Mm-hmm.
The Resident Evil games also, the original ones were good at doing that, but I think that Silent Hill and what Team Silence was able to do is just how to do horror right
Mm-hmm.
in any medium.
There's also horror games are different from horror movies because they can actually have mechanics that will um, help give that feeling to a player. Like the original Resident Evil games, I think, were the ones that had like ink cartridges and stuff, which meant that if you wanted to save, you had to have the item in your inventory that was taking up inventory space to use, which you only could find a limited number of throughout the game. Um, so then you build this sort of pressure of, do I want to keep this? Do I even want to pick this one up because I know there's one here? Do I want to use the save point? Should I be saving it for later? And while you're trying to think of that, you're also thinking about, okay, where am I even going to go next? Like, what am I even doing? And it helps build that sort of tension just through the game mechanics, which I really enjoy.
I also think that an advantage that horror games have in over movies and books is that it's a standard it's a standard thing that while you are traversing the map, you are going to find things that explain what was happening.
Mm-hmm.
And like you're going to find a diary of someone that was becoming a zombie.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to find you find yourself in a lab and you see a case study of the virus,
Mm-hmm. Or you see
and it's
somebody
like,
like middle of turning into one.
yes, and people discussing ideas about this thing that would escape and become a big monster. And
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, they you don't have that in movies. You can't find yourself you can't watch a movie, see that you are in the lab and be like, no, wait, I want to open this computer and look at the log files. What was the medical proceeding being done here?
Mm-hmm.
In a game you can.
Mm-hmm.
And that is environmental storytelling, because sometimes you have, okay, you are in a hospital, why is that bed full of blood?
Mm-hmm.
oh, the trail of blood is going outside of the room, so you follow it. Oh, it's a big monster. Environmental storytelling. You can't have that in a movie.
Mm-hmm.
You can't discover that by yourself or just saying, I'm not going there. And I don't know, I think video games have a advantage over a lot of things when compared to movies.
Mm-hmm. What would you say you like about making games?
I like to see the end results,
Mm-hmm.
and I like that games give me excuse to just keep drawing a lot.
What would you say you don't enjoy about making games?
So it's less about games in and of itself and more like my own abilities. I
Mm-hmm.
have a hard time learning things and retaining information.
Mm-hmm.
So that frustrates me. That is the thing that frustrates me the most about making games is this this own thing of me. But besides that, I don't think there is much that I dislike about making games.
Mm-hmm. Do you think there's something in games that everybody is going to have to incorporate at some point, whether it's, like VR or voice acting or anything like that, multiplayer?
I think that depends a lot of who is making the game, which studio. I think it depends a lot of the people working on it.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, speaking of VR, recently I played Half-Life Alyx,
Mm-hmm.
and it's the best VR game I ever played. I love Half-Life, and but I wouldn't say, oh, Half-Life 1 and 2 should be in VR.
Right.
No, they shouldn't. They are perfect the way they are. They are so perfect that a whole group of people remake Half-Life 1 is still as a normal first-person shooter. Half-Life Alyx is perfect as a VR game because it was thought as a VR game.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it depends of what the people working on the game in question
Mm-hmm.
wants. But something that I think everybody should start to put in their game is accessibility options.
Yes.
I don't think that accessibility options are something that you should question. I just think that they should be. They
Mm-hmm.
should just be there.
Yes. Um, yeah, but I mean, even something so simple as control remapping. I've played a few games where, it won't let me change the arrow keys to WASD, even though I
Yeah,
use a laptop where the keys for the arrows are like really tiny.
yeah,
Or no middle mouse button options, like for the scroll wheel. I do not have
yeah.
one of those, and so
Me
some
neither.
games I just can't play. Um, Also, another thing in that regard is even things like Discord, where I'll open it and I have to limit how many servers I'm even a part of, because otherwise I have to like drag and drop servers to scroll them because it's middle mouse button only. Um, there's a lot of things in tech in general, but also in games, that really need to serve accessibility more. And we are starting to see that. We're starting to see custom controllers and stuff, and
Yeah,
that's great, and I'm glad for that. Um, but it's also unfortunate that so many people have to like build this sort of thing outside of games, you know, outside of like what's built into the game.
yeah. I've been seeing a lot more indie games having accessibility options than AAA games,
Mm-hmm.
and even with things that are as simple as remapping controls. And I play a lot of fighting games, and remapping controls is fundamental to that sort of game because
Yes.
some people play on a joystick, some people play on an arcade stick,
Mm-hmm.
some people just have their own weird controllers that they need And even in arcade sticks, you have arcade sticks with 12 buttons,
Mm-hmm.
others with 6 buttons. Like, and it shouldn't be just a thing for fighting games.
Mm-hmm.
It should be a thing for every sort of game, but it just doesn't happen.
Right. Okay. Is there something that you think indie games and studios can do better than AAA games and studios?
Telling more personal stories.
Mm-hmm.
I like I don't think a studio with 200 people can tell a personal story.
Mm-hmm.
Not well, at least. I I'm a big fan of Life is Strange,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't like the direction the story took
Mm-hmm.
because it started very personal, but you could just see in the game that a lot of the turns that the story takes are a company demanded things.
Yes.
And this happens a lot with AAA. Like Life is Strange isn't AAA, but especially with AAA games, like because you are not just answering to people in the studio, or answering to CEOs of big companies, investors, and I'm reminded I'm reminded of a story about Spec Ops: The Line,
Mm-hmm.
which is a third-person shooter. They had to add multiplayer to it because the CEO of the company told them to do it. The publishers told them to do it, despite multiplayer being totally against what the game was going for.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, I won't say it's an amazing story, but it's just one of these things of after you get to a certain size, you just lose control of your own game.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not. Uh, I do think that maybe with middle grades game like Life is Strange itself, you could do a personal thing,
Mm-hmm.
but you have to have a laser focused vision.
Yeah, I definitely agree on that. Also because, AAA games try to make games that will appeal to the broadest amount of people, whereas at indie scale, um, we try to make games generally for ourselves, or maybe for a specific person, or maybe just like a specific theme, that we'll aim for. And maybe it's incredibly niche, um, but it's at least, you know, it has a focus to it. Partly because we just can't afford to try and please everybody because that takes too long, but also it helps to really narrow the game down to where a person can look at it and know this is what I'm in for, and I'm glad somebody's doing it, and I'm absolutely going to buy this game. Um, so I would say that, yeah, that's absolutely something that indies are able to do better than AAA. Um, do you have any advice for people who want to get into making games? As much of a your mileage may vary thing that advice is.
First of all, just start
Mm-hmm.
and always be 100% on your bullshit. Never try to do something that is going to hit the biggest amounts of people possible. Just do something that you would like to see or to play.
Mm-hmm.
And because really you can't compete with Netflix or Marvel. You you making a thing that hits the biggest number of people possible is impossible.
Mm-hmm.
So just make a game for yourself and other people will play it.
Hmm. Okay, well, for our last set of questions, these are a lot less game related. Um, I like to ask this ending survey so people can get to know the developer behind the games a bit better. Um, what would you say is your favorite virtue?
I don't have one, but I would just say to always be 100% on my bullshits.
I consider that a virtue. um, what would you say is like the core aspect of your personality?
Anger.
Hmm.
I see the state that the world is in, especially now, especially with 2020,
Hmm.
and I'm like, I'm angry. That's it.
Hmm. No, I understand that. That's it's partly why I put the bundle together. I put it together for a lot of different reasons, and eventually there was a tipping point where I was like, all right, F it, I'm going to do the bundle. Um, but yeah, it's very difficult to see all this stuff going on, and it's good. It's also I find it tough because I work on games full time. And it's very hard to feel like it some days that you're making any difference at all. Like there's doctors out there, there's people who are able to drive and move other people around and help other people out, and I'm sitting here just doing this. But I've come to the decision, I guess, not realization, but I guess I've decided more that it's important to be able to give people just a moment of peace. Not necessarily distract them from everything, but at least for a moment, just give them a place where that doesn't exist. A moment where that's not at the forefront of their mind. Um,
Yeah. One of the things that I try to accomplish with my games is try to get people to feel the same feeling that I had when I was a kid watching anime,
mhm,
which is I can turn myself off to the world and just see Trigon.
mhm,
That's the feeling. I'm watching Bleach. Everything else is secondary.
mhm. Um, what would you say are your favorite qualities in a person?
Not assuming that you know better. Like everybody's going through their own stuff, some stuff that you will never go through.
Mhm,
So just don't assume that you know better. Is like is it's like seeing a depressed person that has depression and not saying try yoga.
right.
Like if the person wants help, they will ask for help. If they don't want, that's why they aren't asking.
Mhm. And also, it's important to give the right help, um,
Yes.
or at least like if you're not sure that you can. Um, it's a difficult thing to know how to help somebody and how to do it correctly, but it's also people don't ask very often, and so it's important to understand the value of just asking, like, what can I do to help you? Um, and that really does go a long way.
Yeah.
Um, but um, what do you appreciate the most in your friends?
That they are alive. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's good that you have a friends that you can send a message with like, hey, are you alive? And they answer, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I am breathing oxygen and eating. I like that in my friends.
Mm-hmm. Um, what would you say is your main fault or flaw?
is that I'm usually angry.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's it.
What is your favorite way to spend time?
I really like watching videos or reading essays where people are just talking about something that they love.
Hmm.
It's one of the it's one of my favorite things because that sort of excitement is contagious.
Hmm.
A channel that I really like is Noah Gervais, and he makes these long videos about video games that he likes, and is always you can see that he's passionate about video games.
Hmm.
And that thing is contagious. I usually finish watching a video of his and I'm like, I should make a video about that PS2 game that I like.
Hmm.
I never end up doing it, but it's a very good sort of energy.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, yeah, I have a friend that I talk to, and sometimes I'll go off about game stuff, and they're not in the scene at all, but they play games. But they're not a developer, so they just kind of like nod their head and listen to me just kind of ramble. And then there's times where, because they're really into games that I'm not into, and so sometimes I'll just notice like, oh, I'm getting like 10 messages about this game. Like, okay, I'll sit here and I'll listen. That's fine. Like,
Uh,
it's
I
very nice to
love that.
actually, yeah, no, it's I absolutely adore that sort of
Like,
interaction.
especially when, like, I have a friend that is really into Rainbow Six Siege,
Hmm.
and all that I know is that there's two Brazilian characters and that's it.
Hmm.
And sometimes they are like talking about professional Siege players and the professional scene in general. And I'm like, I don't get anything that you're talking about, but I like it.
Hmm.
it it's I just love that sort of thing.
Hmm.
It's really good to listen to people talking about what they love.
Hmm. What is your idea of happiness?
I don't think I have one. Like, yeah, I I don't think I have one. When
Hmm.
I'm happy, I'm happy. That's it.
Okay. What is your idea of misery?
Being in Brazil and having a life expectancy of 35 years old.
Hmm. That is not unreasonable.
And there are places that are worse.
Hmm. If not yourself, who would you like to be?
I like myself, so I don't know who, but I would like to be Jeff Bezos and just redistribute all the money.
That's a
And
good
then
one.
once I'm done and my investors are like, Jeff, why? I would just jump from the window and say, so long, suckers.
It's really good. I like that.
And I have
Uh,
a parachute with my face on it. Jeff Bezos' face.
mhm.
And that's it.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I really like that answer. Um, where would you like to live?
Hmm, that's a nice question. The any place that would be good for trans people, like
Hmm.
Portugal is a place like that. Switzerland, I think. There's a couple of places that are better for trans people.
Hmm.
I think if we're like, oh, in South America, I would say Argentina.
Hmm. Um, I'm going to ask this again, but slightly different. Let's say a fictional world, like let's say Earth, but you know, uh, uh, trans is accepted as just a normal thing that people can be and that people are. Um, then where would you live?
That's a tough question.
Hmm.
That's a tough question. Any worlds where I could become a magical girl, because like magical girls are usually teenagers, and when I was a teenager, I was like really repressed and also kind of a demon. And like, oh look, it's a magical girl. Why is she asking that homeless guy to buy her booze? Oh my god, it would be that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that magical girl in the arcades and not fighting monsters?
Mm-hmm.
I would just arrange some excuse like union rules. I
That'd be
would
pretty
start a
good.
union
Mm-hmm.
and just say no,
Mm-hmm.
thank you very much.
Um, what would you say is your favorite color?
Very bright red.
What about your favorite flower?
The lily.
That's a good one. Um, your favorite animal?
The platypus. That's what peak performance looks like. The only mammal that lays eggs.
Yeah, no, it's a very optimized, you know.
That's what a perfect build looks like.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any favorite authors?
I have two. I'm going to butcher their names, so I'm
Mm-hmm.
sorry, but Tan Sin Muir, which is the author of Gideon the Ninth.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really good book about lesbian necromancers, and it gets really funny at times. She has a really good touch between seriousness and silliness.
Mm-hmm.
Her latest book, which is Harold the Ninth, which is a sequel, has some moments that I just start cracking up, and like there are moments that were just followed by really serious revelations, some really hard shit, and like here's a joke to make the ambience light.
Mm-hmm.
And another author that I really like is Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, which is the guy that wrote The Little Prince.
Mm-hmm.
The Little Prince is just the perfect book, in my opinion.
Do you have any favorite developers?
NPC Casey and No No Nami, playing their games just made me want to make games.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any favorite heroes or heroines in fiction or otherwise?
Magical girls in general, because I just like that. I just like the messages that these animes pass.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any favorite painters or composers?
Van Gogh,
Mm-hmm.
because I think he would be a nice guy to talk to. He
Mm-hmm.
looks like a funky fellow.
And for our last question, any special or peculiar talents?
I'm really good in this at dissecting and dismantling bodies.
Not a bad skill to have.
Yeah,
Especially useful for cleaning work.
yeah.
Um, okay, well, that is it for my questions. Do you have anything that you want to ask or say?
Okay, if two guys were on the moon and one high-fived the other, would that be sick or what?
That would be so sick.
Yeah.
Mission status sick. Yeah.
World peace achieved.
Okay. Well, do you have any links that you want to drop, like any social media stuff, game stuff, etc.?
Um, okay, my game stuff is TangledVirus at itch.io.
Mm-hmm.
You can find all of my games in there. I have interactive fiction. I have visual novels. They are all very gay. They they are all kind of weird. They are pretty fun.
Hmm.
And if anyone wants to get in touch with me or just send compliments or anything, I am TangledVirus on Twitter,
Hmm.
and that's it.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for your time. And,
Thank you for having me.
oh yeah, no problem. And thank you all for watching. Um, this has been myself, Damien Crawford at Developer Damien, with TangledVirus for episode 6 of Indie2Indie. And thank you all so much for watching. Bye.
Bye.